121 milligrams of caffeine a day. That's about 3 cups of coffee. Glaucoma is the leading cause of blindness in the U.S. The study was published in the June print issue of Ophthalmology. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Sharing the treatment. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Ahead of the G7 summit, President Biden confirming the U.S. is about to donate millions of doses of the coronavirus vaccine.
The United States will purchase an additional 500 million doses from Pfizer vaccine, that will donate nearly 100 low and lower middle income countries. They will be the beneficiaries.
The president also met Thursday with Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, both men signing an updated version of the 1941 Atlantic Charter, updated to include cybersecurity, global health issues, and global warming. On Friday, the president addresses the G7 summit. Back in Washington, there's a proposed compromise infrastructure deal.
10 senators from both parties announcing a broad agreement on an 8-year, $1.2 trillion infrastructure plan. That emerging deal would not raise taxes. There's also word from the Hill that a number of members of the Senate Democratic caucus are threatening to oppose it, putting the effort in peril.
Fox's Kevin Corke. The White House says they'll be talking with senators to iron out details, including how to pay for it. He's already declared a state of emergency at his state's southern border because of illegal border crossings. Now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he is forming a task force on border security and homeland security, and
I will announce next week the plan for the state of Texas to begin building the border wall in the state of Texas.
Governor says he'll sign a state budget that allocates more than $1 billion to border security. The New York Times reports the Justice Department subpoenaed cell phone data from at least 2 members of the House Intelligence Committee during the 2018 Russia investigation, trying to find the source of leaks of secret testimony. Committee Chair Adam Schiff calling for an investigation. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Congressional Democrats are calling for another investigation into former President Trump after a report suggests the Justice Department seized cell phone records from some House members.
The Justice Department under President Trump subpoenaed Apple for data from at least 2 members of the House Intelligence Committee in 2017 and 2018. That, according to the New York Times. The subpoena is part of an effort to hunt down leaks that led to news stories about contacts between Trump associates and Russia. The hunt focused on Congressman Adam Schiff and other committee members. Now, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants an investigation, saying these actions appear to be yet another egregious assault on our democracy waged by the former president. Former President Trump had accused Schiff of leaking classified information. In Washington, Jill Nato, Fox News.
A deadly supermarket shooting Thursday in Royal Palm Beach, Florida.
Upon arrival, deputies located 3 deceased individuals inside the store near the produce area. We have an adult male, an adult female, and a child. What we're doing right now is we're documenting the scene. We're trying to determine what led up to the shooting. We're talking to witnesses. We're reviewing video.
Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department spokesperson Terry Barbera. The dead include a woman and her grandson and the shooter, 55-year-old Timothy Wall. But police say so far they found no known connection between them. Illinois is lifting all capacity limits on bars, restaurants, businesses, and other venues Friday, nearly 15 months after the first stay-at-home orders during the coronavirus pandemic. Businesses can still set their own rules for capacity and masks and social distancing, and masks are still required on public transportation and in airports, schools, and hospitals. More than 68% of Illinois residents 18 and older have received at least one dose of a coronavirus vaccine. 51% are fully vaccinated. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hoffaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and si tuos mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Today, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, as long as I got anything to say about it, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'm going to have a lot to say about it for a long time. Every afternoon here at 4, Monday through Friday. All right, let's see what the Daily News has to say today. What, if anything, the Daily News has to say today. Zemi Ikotni, our local version of Meet the Press, except ours is better than theirs. Chuck Todd pretends to be objective and fair and reasonable. I don't. You know, you're not going to, if you're looking for balance, etc., this may not be the place, because this is a constitutionally oriented conservative talk show. So you won't find out, you won't find someone here who's trying to give you both sides of the story. You're going to find out what I think is important about the story. So here's what the Daily News says. Improve reliability. We need better mass transit. We need a better mass transit system, not more bus stops. The U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure provided details on the Invest in America Act, $547 million, 5-year transportation proposal for federal investments in roads, bridges, and transits. It aims to fund 1,473 projects, including 5 mass transit projects. Specific to the goal of standing up a usable and reliable public transportation system, Delegate San Nicolas requested a director investment for bus shelters throughout the island. The delegate worked with Guam Regional Transportation Authority Director Selva Bauta on the need to increase the number of bus shelters and to invest in ones designed to more comfortably accommodate public transportation users. San Nicolas said the measure, if passed, is expected to bring in millions of dollars to Guam's economy. Well, those who use and rely on mass transit will definitely benefit from more bus shelters. What it means is riders will be more comfortable waiting for the limited number of buses, many of which frequently run late. Yes, Guam lacks an adequate number of bus shelters, but more importantly, it lacks a, quote, reusable and reliable transportation system. Besides a lack of vehicles that are often late, there just aren't enough routes and service hours are limited. The main focus needs to be improving public transportation so that it becomes a viable option for people to get to and from work, go shopping or run errands, make doctor's appointments on time, or to be able to night on the town and get home safely. In our quest to live in a more sustainable manner, sustainability. We need options to driving our personal vehicles everywhere. Right now, there isn't an efficient or reliable public transportation system. One sensible way is for elected officials to get Guam out of the public transportation business and finding a contractor or contractors that can provide mass transit services consistently and effectively. So first you say we need more buses, then you say we need to get the Gov Guam out of the bus business. Well, you throw enough of them out there and you're bound to get the right answer sooner or later. I've talked about this more than once. I've even testified at the legislature. We should not call what we have a mass transportation system. There's no mass involved. What we have is a transportation system that accommodates those who have no other means of getting around. That means very poor people, people that can't afford cars, and they can probably barely afford bus fare. So you can't run a viable business when your target customers don't have any money. I mean, you don't need a PhD in economics to figure that one out. And I've harped on this before. If we had a real mass transit system, then we could provide those who don't have enough, don't have much money, poor people. We could provide for them as a form of social welfare, probably give them fare-free rides. But the first thing is to have a real mass transit system. And my approach to it would be that the government should authorize franchises. The companies could bid on franchises and pay the government for the ability to run various kinds of bus services on island. Now, we've got plenty of buses on the island, and we provide pretty good transportation for some of the folks on the island, but our system is so fragmented. We've got public school buses. We've got whatever it is that Selva Bauta runs. We've got the paratransit service. I think we still have Liberty buses that run from Anderson downtown and from Naval Station uptown. And then we have all of the buses in normal times that cart the tourists around, take them all over the Tumon area up to the two malls. Now, if those were integrated into one system, one efficient system, we would have real mass transit. And if you study mass transit a little bit, you find that rolling stock is your biggest investment. And what's inefficient about most mass transit systems is that you have huge demands twice a day, the two commuting times, and the rest of the time, your rolling stock is underutilized. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way here, because the Liberty buses would be run before and after the rush hour. The tourist transportation buses would be pretty constant, probably from 10 o'clock in the morning up until 8 o'clock at night. And then the school bus runs would only be during the times of schools. So if we were able to put all that together, we could have a real mass transit system. And if we did, then one of our social welfare agencies could issue passes to the indigent so they could climb on the bus and get to the doctor or wherever they're going, rather than rather than horse around with this non-mass transit system that we have right now. And I've said this a million times. During the time that I was working in Agana, if I could have walked from Paris Acres down to Marine Corps Drive and knew that a bus would be coming along every 15 minutes, I'd have climbed on one of those buses and rode it downtown. And from there, I would have walked to my office. It would have saved me a lot of money from driving my car back and forth every day. But the real treasure would be the time that I gained. I can't read when I'm driving. But if I were sitting on a bus between Jigo and Agana, I could read. I could make really good use of that time. I'd save money, etc. That's what we need, is a real mass transit system, so the buses are reliable and predictable. The few times, I haven't tried to take the bus for a long time. There was a time, you know, if I had to turn my car into a shop or something, I'd try to catch the bus. But what a nightmare. You can't find out what the schedules are. Even if you do, it's totally inaccurate. It just is not, to use the word system is not only inappropriate, it's an error in your English usage. So that should be our goal, to have a real mass transit system. And, you know, different places have done different things. You know, in certain places like London and Singapore, if you want to drive into the city center, it's going to cost you money, because in order to do that, you have to have a transponder on your car. A record is made, and you are charged for driving into the city center during rush hour. Yeah. Some places will reserve lanes on the highway for their city buses. So I'm not advocating this, but imagine if the center lane from Anderson all the way through Agana, all the way to Naval Station, were a bus lane. And you had elevated platforms so that you could walk over, climb on that, and the bus is going to get to downtown faster than you are in your car. Another advantage. Some places install parking meters and charge a pretty good price for parking your car downtown. All of these things have the object of discouraging people driving their own cars, which is really very inefficient. And if you're a greenie out there, you know, one bus puts a whole lot less carbon into the atmosphere than the cars driven by the 36 people that could be riding on that bus. So if we want to have a real bus system, that's what we should do. But somebody with a little juice has to take hold of it. We can't do a self about it and just do what we've always been doing and say, well, now we have a mass transit system. It's better because now we got more bus stops. That won't work. I have advocated at the legislature that until we could have a real mass transit system, we would be better off reimbursing cab fare. Have a means test and determine who has to ride the bus to get around because he can't afford, because they can't afford to get around. And, you know, give them some sort of a chit. Maybe this is something public health could do. So they ride a taxi, they get a receipt from the taxi, and we reimburse them taxi fare. And then we could cut a deal with some of the taxi companies that they would give those customers a preferred rate. And we've got a couple of companies, the names of one is Stroll, and then there's another company that operate like Uber and Lyft. We could perhaps cut a deal with them. Instead of having the huge operating costs and capital investments that we have for a so-called mass transit system that really doesn't give anybody a ride anywhere. But it causes a lot of people to stand around waiting, saying, oh, I wonder when the bus is going to get
You ever see that depot over there at the Tremor Village? When it was active, you just see people milling around waiting for their bus.
Yeah.
And then over at the Gagnon pool.
Yeah.
Also.
I'm kind of a mass transit buff. So when I go to a city, a lot of times I will just ride the bus because I like to ride on buses.
Love New York City's bus system.
And the subway.
Yeah, subway's fun.
What a good way to get around. Seattle had a really imaginative system. I used to go to Seattle. You could walk from the airport to the nearest bus terminal. It's like a half mile or something like that. You get on a bus, and it would take you downtown Seattle, and then the bus would go underground, and it was a combination diesel and trolley bus. So it would go underground, pop up its trolleys, and run on electricity in these routes downtown. And the underground part, no charge. So once you got to downtown Seattle, you could get from one place to another, no charge. It's a beautiful system. But somebody sat down and figured out what it was that was needed. They just didn't say, well, let's hire a bunch of buses and give some people a job, and we'll call it a mass transit system, which is what we did. We never really did any planning. And there are people that do this. There are mass transit planners. They're not free, but we do ourselves a huge favor if we could spend some money on them.
You know what's interesting? I've been exploring a lot of the apps on my phone, and there is actually a game where you map out a transit system for a city. I'm like, how ingenious is that? That's almost like a resume right there.
Yeah.
You win the game, and you win a job.
That's right. Very true. So improving reliability, troubleshooting and fixing a system that's systemically flawed is a waste of time. This used to be a real popular word 20 years ago. What we need is a paradigm shift, right?
Well, inflation, you need more than a pair of dimes.
That's true. Pair of quarter shift. All right, let's go to the Post and see what the Post is up to today. The Post got a blue star yesterday. And let's see, that takes the Post up to 250 blue stars compared to 59 for the Daily News. A distracted driver walks free while the victim's family is left feeling justice was not served. Look out for that word, justice. It's a really, really easy word to throw around. It makes you feel really good to say it. But like all words, it has a meaning. And justice is not a synonym for the result I wanted. Jericho Zion Davis was a 4-year-old boy with a big smile. On May 7, 2019, a young woman who was backing out of the driveway of a house just across from the boy's home was not paying attention to safety as she was entering the asphalt roundabout shared by a few families that live in the cul-de-sac. No, a roundabout in a cul-de-sac? How could that possibly work?
I would be confused too then.
Yeah, I would be very, very confused. All right, a roundabout. We only have one roundabout on Guam outside. Anderson's got 3 or 4 of them.
Are they real roundabouts?
Real roundabouts.
Because the one we have up here is not.
Ours is a real roundabout. It's just not signed as a roundabout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had a roundabout. We couldn't just let it be a roundabout. We had to put stop signs and really goof it up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but if you go to England, the British Isles, the United Kingdom, they're big on roundabouts. And the way it works is you have a circle, and you have probably 3 lanes that go around the circle, and then you enter the circle from diagonal entrances. There's no pull in and turn right. Diagonal entrances, sort of like on-ramps. And if you're going to go all the way around the roundabout, so let's say you're hitting, let me use the clock here, if I can remember what the clock looks like. Let's say you're entering at 3 o'clock and you want to exit at 6. You pull into the innermost lane, and you go around, and when you get to 9 o'clock, you merge out to the outside lane and you pull off at 6. If you enter at 3 and you're getting off at 12, you stay in the outside lane and you get off at 12. And it takes a little getting used to, but it's a beautiful system. The traffic moves so much faster than it does with traffic signals. If you're a municipal planner, it's so much cheaper than traffic signal. No moving parts, no electronics, nothing to break, etc. So it's a really beautiful system. Like I said, we screwed it up here. We couldn't just have a roundabout. We had to put stop signs. Imagination, right?
There's some really cool ones in Massachusetts, where I used to live near in Connecticut, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
It is scary at first.
Yeah. Now, if you're in England, the story I tell about being in England is that I wouldn't go to the UK without a GPS. I wouldn't even think about it. Because if I hadn't had a GPS, I rented a car at Heathrow, I'd still be driving around Heathrow. I'd have never gotten out of Heathrow. And one time we got on a stretch where there was a roundabout, a straightaway, and another roundabout. The GPS didn't handle it very well. And after going through this roundabout 3 times, it dawned on me, hey, I just keep going through the same roundabouts. But seriously, roundabouts are good deals. Now, a cul-de-sac is really not a very good deal. What is meant by a cul-de-sac? It's a straight street that's a dead end. And instead of ending at a wall and a sign that says dead end, when you get to the end of the street, it flares out into a circle, which is round. But everything that is round is not a roundabout.
I'm familiar with this street. It is neither a roundabout nor a cul-de-sac.
Really?
It's a dead end.
It's just a plain dead end, huh? Yeah. Well, at Paris, and the bad thing about cul-de-sacs is there's so much wasted space out in the middle of that cul-de-sac. And then curbside parking doesn't work very well because the curb is curved, right? It's not a good construction method at all. At Paris Acres, at the end of each street, there is what could pass for a large parking slot with a no parking sign on it. You pull in there and you do a Y turn and you're out of there. So, yeah, so apparently Marlene Risa was neither backing into a roundabout nor a cul-de-sac. She was backing into a dead-end street. Yeah, okay. Post, there goes your blue star. Right there.
Right off the bat.
Yeah, you kind of got to know what you're writing about. And if you don't know what a roundabout is, check with Dr. Google. He'll probably even show you a picture. All right. I'm going to correct this. On May 7, 2019, a young woman who was backing out of the driveway of a house just across from the boy's home was not paying attention to safety as she was entering the asphalt dead-end street shared by a few families that live on that street. This woman, Marlene Risa Iwili, 24 at the time, attempted to retrieve Pugla as she was backing up into the dead end, according to court documents in her case. She was so distracted that she only felt a bump and didn't know at first she had just taken the life of little Jericho. Jericho was just steps from his house. Iwili told authorities she had no idea what had happened. A good phrase to completely eliminate from your vocabulary. Do you know what time it is? I have no idea. So it could be 3 o'clock, even though there's a bright sun in the sky, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning. No, it's probably about 2:30. Well, you told me you had no idea. Yeah, all right. So anyhow, she had no idea what had happened. She attempted to render assistance to the boy when she realized the little boy had been fatally crushed under the car she was driving. The area where it happened in Dededo, called Manga Court, does not see motorists passing through. It is a dead end.
Wow, this is a schizophrenic road.
So the three descriptions in one story. It's a cul-de-sac. It's a roundabout. It's a dead end, right? I suppose in the next paragraph it's going to be a freeway.
I hope not.
Yeah. The neighborhood had offered, until the tragedy, a sense of safety. No motorists drove through the neighborhood unless they lived there or were visiting a few families in the area. There were bouncies and bikes outside of houses in this neighborhood. Surveillance camera footage from the boy's home showed that David tripped. As he was getting up, he saw a car approaching and signaled for the car to stop, but the vehicle struck him near where his dad was installing canopies for a birthday party. The little boy became Guam's 10th traffic fatality in 2019. He would have turned 6 this year. The loss of Jericho came back to people's memories Monday when the driver returned to court. Iwili appeared before Judge Maria Senzone to enter her guilty plea. She admitted to vehicular homicide. The plea agreement calls for a 5-year prison sentence that she will not have to serve because all of it will be suspended. She was placed on 3 years supervised probation. Her driving privileges have been revoked for 5 years. Rose David, the grandmother of Jericho, said the family is still hurting. The grandma was in the house the day the boy died. She said Jericho was watching TV when the boy, for an unknown reason, ran outside. The case's outcome has led the grandma to question our system of justice. We'll come back to little Jericho in a minute.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win, Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th through July 21st, weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car will be given away to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today.
Circle K brings you the G-Dog. Get ready for a succulent and flavorful street hot dogs made famous in New York City. These dogs are made with 100% all beef and cooked in a delicious blend of spices for a plump, juicy hot dog experience that's bursting with flavor. Visit your nearest participating Circle K and dig in on the best hot dog experience on island. The G-Dog, served from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Available at Anigua, Dededo, and Ocean Vista Circle K locations only. Circle K, hey, take it easy.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, back to this editorial in the Post. The case's outcome has led the grandma to question our system of justice. Okay, now when people say that, I ask, how was it that the system didn't work? Was someone who had committed a crime not prosecuted? No, she was prosecuted. Conviction? Yes. Sentence? Yes. Well, how did you say that? How do you criticize our system of justice? Well, they should have put him in jail. So you didn't like the result. Okay. Grandmother says, even though it bothers us, we really can't do anything. It's hurting us as of right now. It's very hard for us to take. It's wrong, and that's why sometimes the law is wrong. Well, if you wanted to be critical of something, you wouldn't be critical of the law. If there's a 5-year penalty for what she did was vehicular homicide, you might want to say the judge was wrong. David said the punishment does not fit the crime. It's in God's hands, even if I'm not okay. Even if it's wrong, we know that it is up to the law. We just have to pray we will see him. I will see him again. Yes, we have to forgive. What else can we do? Now, here's the editorial comment. The punishment, or lack of it, does fall short, considering the little boy was killed as he tried to signal a driver to stop. This was no busy street. It was the boy's neighborhood enclave. The boy was run over just steps from his home. If the driver had been careful, Jericho would have had a chance of living after he tripped. Now, only the driver who committed vehicular homicide gets to move on with her life. Okay, so far so good. Now, here we go. Here's the last sentence in this editorial. That's not fair. That's not fair. All right. Yesterday, we had a story about a lady who engaged in food stamp fraud, Stephanie Munya. And she was also given 90 days home confinement instead of a jail sentence. So let's just talk a little bit about crime and punishment as a much more complicated subject than what one might gather from reading the Daily News editorial, the Post editorial that winds up by saying, that's not fair. Okay, so starting out here with Willie, what she did, apparently what she was doing is she was reaching around looking for the pugwa that she was dropped when she was backing up. Instead of just stopping and looking for the pugwa, she kept backing up, right? So that was really a dumb thing to do. How evil was assuming that that's the facts, how evil was Willie in doing something that stupid, backing up a car and not paying attention where she was going? Is that a gross evil? Is it stupid? It's what we would call, in the law, it's what we would call negligence. In fact, it's probably gross negligence, backing up an automobile and not watching where you're going, not looking where you're going. In collision parlance, it's called not maintaining your proper lookout. That could be gross negligence. How seriously should we punish someone for being negligent? As in this case, when you don't have an evil intent. How seriously do we punish someone for being stupid and negligent? What would be fair? That's not an easy question to answer. And the fact that she killed somebody in the process is, of course, what brought our attention to it. Then we take a look at Stephanie Munya, who engaged in food stamp fraud by having a SNAP card and, in effect, selling the revenue from the SNAP card to a restaurateur so the restaurateur could make a little bit of profit. She did $15,000 worth of this kind of cheating. Is doing what Stephanie Munya did, is that evil?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
The deed, but did it make her evil?
Say
Two
again?
different questions. The deed was, in a sense, in that it was wrong. Well, depends on what you define as evil.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to use my gut here, my intestines in my stomach here. No, it's not evil. Something like premeditated murder would be evil.
Got it.
All right. Is it what we would call, what is referred to as moral turpitude? Does it require a dishonest state of mind? Absolutely. Now, without looking at the results, without looking at head, which is more worthy, more punishment worthy? Committing a crime that requires a dishonest state of mind in order for a conviction or a crime that involves negligence or even gross negligence?
The former.
The former, yeah. So you see how hard this gets, but Stephanie Monia didn't kill anybody. In fact, she came to court and she said exactly the opposite. I know what I did was wrong. I got 9 kids. I only did this because of my 9 kids.
She had an idea of what she did.
She did, yeah, she did. So her defense, and it's not a legal defense, I suppose it's something of a moral defense. I didn't want to do it, but I had 9 kids to feed, and I didn't have any money. This was the only way I could get any money, so I did it. I'm really sorry. The distracted driver, if the distracted driver told us, yeah, I wasn't paying attention when I was backing up. I know what I did was wrong. I'm really sorry. I killed a little boy. Yeah. Now, you can make an argument. I don't know that I'd want to be the one that makes it. That what Stephanie Monia did requires more punishment than what Marlene Iwilli did. Because Marlene Iwilli was negligent. She was stupid. But she didn't have that dishonest state of mind.
That requires a lot of suppression of emotion to come up with that, yeah.
Yeah. So, people who put together criminal laws, and I know they teach criminal justice at the university. I don't know exactly what it is that they teach. But when you get into, the hard philosophical questions of criminal law, it's not easy. And I think it's really interesting that these 2 editorials came up at the same time. Now, the Post is saying, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a judge in Fort Smith, Arkansas, during the time that all of the crimes that occurred in the Oklahoma Territory were prosecuted in the U.S. District Court in Fort Smith. That's where the John Wayne movie came from. What was it called? True Grit. Yeah, there were 2 True Grits. And I can't remember, I should have looked up the judge's name. But he had the reputation of being a hanging judge. And when the Daily News is saying, we need a hanging judge. When people do this stuff, lock them up. Throw the key away. And I'm not bringing this up here in defense of judges. Judges don't need anybody to defend them. But just to show you some of the dilemmas, the moral dilemma that a judge has to contend with. I suppose if one were to look into it, Marlene Iwilli has children of her own. And to lock her up? Okay, a couple of pretty interesting editorials there. We'll move on to the card. You remember Abigail Van Buren, a newspaper columnist? Dear Abby. Yeah, well, Abigail Van Buren has passed away, but she has been replaced, and her column still runs. It's called Dear Abby. So the first item on the card is called Dear Abby versus Tall Tales. Next, we've got Biden versus the Justice Department in Tina, which is a reprise from yesterday. Victor Davis Hanson versus This Revolution. Plow versus Critical Race Theory. Therese and Lebowski versus Doctors. Here we are back again to states of mind and wrongdoing. The right-wing, quote, conspiracy theory versus left-wing, quote, truth. USA Today versus reality. Chinese-American Civil Rights Coalition versus Turley and Tall Tales. And let me see who I've got here in, I recognize the phone number. It's R. Carl. And the second caller is J.U. All right. Starting out with R. Carl. Good afternoon, R. Carl.
Hey, Bob. Still doing my renovations around the house when you guys are in the background. I was listening to you talking about these interesting things about sentencing and what is more evil than what crime is more evil than another. It's really very interesting. I've got a question for you. What do you think about creative sentencing? Judges that instead of just letting someone off scot-free, they figure out ways for the offender to somewhat pay back society by doing something. You're sentenced to do 6 weeks of cleaning up the parks, if you've trashed a park, that kind of thing. I'm sure you know about it.
It's called community service. And it's,
okay.
Yeah, it's part and parcel of almost all sentences, some community service. And I think that's a pretty good idea. But, of course, it's resource intensive. You got to have somebody out there watching the boys do the community service to make sure that they're doing community service. So it costs money. And then we do have in our criminal justice system the doctrine of restitution. So if you steal my car, let me get into something that doesn't have an insurance dimension. You break into my house and trash my living room, and it cost me $9,000 to fix it up, and you're convicted of burglary, then I could ask for restitution, and a separate hearing would be held to determine what the damage was, and there could be an order for restitution so that the criminal has to pay me back, actually pay into the court, which pays me restitution for the damage. It sounds really good, but unfortunately, the folks that do these kinds of things are often not able to do restitution. If I were the one who were sharing some of my philosophical viewpoints, I would go back to some of the stuff that we did in colonial New England. In colonial New England, if you committed certain kinds of minor crimes, they'd put you in the stock. Out in the village square, there would be this device where you stick your head and your two arms through it, and then a frame comes down and locks, and you're locked there. You're going to be there all day long.
And someone had a market on Rotten Tomatoes.
And everybody walks by and said, "Yeah, that'll teach you, Bob." A little embarrassment can be a very serious deterrent. But in this politically correct 21st century, we don't think in those terms. As an example, our so-called Ethics Commission, which is almost stillborn, but if I were asked to fix it up, I'd say what we need to do is have the Ethics Commission make findings and publish those findings in a newspaper as to what the ethical violation was, etc. And I would do the same thing with a lot of these minor crimes. I would use embarrassment and shame as a method of punishment. And of course, with the community service, I think we go the opposite direction. We want to pretend that, well, they're just out there picking up stuff because they're good citizens. No. Does that answer your question, Carl?
Yeah, Bob. I just think that putting people in locking them in the stock,
yeah,
public, that would go against the trend in our public schools, that it would hurt their self-esteem.
It's very true. It's very true. Now, the Eighth Amendment, I just was peeking at the Eighth Amendment here. The Eighth Amendment does say excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Now, the last clause there, I could never quite understand that. Aren't punishments almost by definition cruel? Unusual, and that's where you could run afoul, some of these creative things if it's unusual. And then there's the idea of restorative justice that the liberals have brought to us. Restorative justice means you sit the victim and the criminal down together and they talk. And the victim tries to make it up the criminal tries to make it up to the victim, and after they've had some counseling and some chats, they can all walk away arm in arm singing kumbayas to one another. I don't think that's very effective.
Yeah, and I think the left wants to pretty much do away with most punishment because they believe that we're all a product of our upbringing.
Well, the left wants to do with punishment for BIPOCs, black, indigenous, people of color, for all the oppressed. There should be no punishment for the oppressed. For the oppressors, there isn't enough punishment to go around.
Very true, very true. Okay, Bob, well, you answered my question. I appreciate that.
And yesterday when I was talking about the New York Times, the rebellion in the newsroom at the New York Times was you shouldn't say things, you shouldn't encourage that protesters be punished, quote unquote, rioters be punished. That was part of the rebellion. So if there's looting, arson, etc., you should never take up any means to stop them from doing that. That would be wrong.
Unless it's January 6th.
Unless it's January 6th, yeah. Okay, Carl, good talking to you. All right, so short break here.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam!
Okay, so here we are. First item on the card, Dear Abby versus Tall Tales. And the title of this one is Friend Prefers Telling Tall Tales Over the Truth. No! Sounds like my kind of person. I wish I had friends like that. Of course I do. Dear Abby, 20 years ago, I reconnected with a childhood friend. When we were in high school together, she used to love telling stories, not all of them true. Most were harmless and cast her as the center of an interesting adventure. After graduation, I headed off to college. She started a job and we lost touch for almost 30 years. We now see each other once or twice a year, but text almost daily. She recently sent me a photo of a now-closed department store and told me she had worked there right after high school in its pet department. She went on to say she got the job because she had raised tropical fish and was comfortable caring for the animals. The problem with her story is that it was I who had that job. I worked there throughout my freshman year in college. Thinking maybe she had taken the job after I left, I asked a few questions, but it quickly became obvious that she had snatched my work experience as her own. I couldn't think of a kind way to challenge her, so all I texted was, Interesting. Now I find myself not believing any of her stories. I don't think she has dementia, but I can't understand why anyone would co-opt someone else's history like this. Should I challenge her at this late date or chalk it up to more of her storytelling? So here we have it. She used to love telling stories, not all of them true. So I wrote to Jeannie Phillips, and I said, can you give me the address of that lady in case I'm ever indisposed and can't handle the show? She'd make a great substitute for host on Tall Tales. Yeah. Tall Tales. The secret to Tall Tales is you never let the truth interfere with the telling of a good story. So all you tailgaters out there in our international radio listening audience, I have a test that you might want to spring on some of your friends to see if they are tailgaters. Okay, well, here it is. They all start with if. If every time you hear honk, honk, you chuckle aloud, you might be a tailgater. If you can recite the Second Amendment from memory, you might be a tailgater. If your hands instinctively conduct the orchestra during the halftime show, you might be a tailgater. If your day is not complete until Tall Tales starts at 4 p.m., you might be a tailgater. If every time to laugh, you now sound like the real Joe Cruz, you might be a tailgater. If you dread Fridays because Tall Tales is not on during the weekend, you might be a tailgater. So that's the test out there. You guys are probably all tailgaters out there today. And once again, I've got problems with my Facebook, so if I don't pay as much attention to Facebook as I'd like to, that's the reason.
Well, we had a loyal tailgater call in a little earlier when our Carl called in, Mark Cruz, and he wanted to let you know that it was Judge Roy Bean you were talking about. Roy Bean. From Valverde County, Texas, the judge.
Okay, well, I'm talking about Missouri.
Ah.
Yeah. Judge Roy Bean was all the law there is west of the Pecos. Yeah, and I've seen Judge Roy Bean's shack out there near the Pecos River in Texas. But what I'm talking about is Fort Smith, Arkansas. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we had Fort Smith, Arkansas, and there was Oklahoma Territory. Back in the days when we had continental territories. Well, there were no courts in Oklahoma Territory. So the court that had jurisdiction over Oklahoma Territory was in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And U.S. Marshals from Fort Smith were law enforcement in the Oklahoma Territory. So I appreciate Mark's chiming in. I'm a kind of a Roy Bean. All the law there is west of the Pecos. And there was a movie starring Paul Newman as Judge Roy Bean, if my memory serves me correctly, which it does if I'm not trying to remember what I did yesterday. Okay, so going on to the next item on the card. This is a repeat. Biden versus the Justice Department. And yesterday, I pointed out that President Biden says, I want Congress to pass a law making SSI available in the territories. Congress has the power to do it. They should do it. And, Tina, how many times, in fact, I wrote a letter to the editor. I wrote a letter to Tina, an open letter to the editor, right? It appeared in both papers. You didn't have to go to the insular cases for that. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
President faces a foreign policy challenge today. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. At the G7 summit meeting, which starts in the south of England, where Fox's Benjamin Hall reports there will be tensions.
Germany and the EU, for example, they want to increase trade ties with China, not weaken them, while President Macron of France has already said he doesn't want to take part in some, quote, ideological campaign against China. Well, if showing a united front against communist China is one of the goals of the summit, and it is, it may well be off to a rocky start and without real hope of substance. So those big issues are not yet being addressed. There are issues and agreements in place on vaccine diplomacy, climate diplomacy. Whether they can talk about countering China and Russia, that remains to be seen.
Yesterday, the President and Prime Minister Boris Johnson signed a revised version of the Atlantic Charter, first signed in 1941.
Updated to reaffirm that promise while speaking directly to the key challenges of this century: cybersecurity, emerging technologies, global health, and climate change.
There are economic issues back home. The Commerce Department says consumer prices were up in May, inflation registering its biggest jump in nearly 13 years. A bipartisan group of 10 senators say they've reached agreements among themselves on a compromise infrastructure plan.
5 Republicans and 5 Democrats say they have a framework on a bipartisan infrastructure deal. The senators say it's fully paid for and won't raise taxes. Sources tell Fox News the plan would call for more than $1 trillion in core physical infrastructure over 8 years, including about $580 billion in new spending. That is less than the $1.7 trillion plan from President Biden, but more than an offer made by a Republican group of senators before talks stalled earlier this week. Any deal would likely need sign-off from leadership of both parties and the White House.
Fox's Jared Halpern. America is listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and situas mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Download it now.
Arizona's Governor Doug Ducey getting an aerial view Thursday of wildfires that have charred about 150,000 acres near Phoenix.
The governor flew over the flames high above the heads of 1,500 hotshot crews on the front lines. A bird's eye view of the Telegraph fire. He said it was like looking at another planet.
That was just desolate and without any water or precipitation and lifeless, and it goes on for miles and miles and miles.
And there are already concerns what the monsoons may bring to this same area, mudslides and flooding later this summer. That's why the governor is calling for a special session. Lawmakers coming together trying to round up more resources to handle other natural disasters in Arizona's future.
Reporter Brian Webb of Fox 10 in Phoenix. Firefighters say they are making progress against those fires. A mystery so far why a man shot and killed a woman and her 1-year-old grandson Thursday inside a supermarket in Royal Palm Beach, Florida. The sheriff's office says there is no known connection between the woman and the shooter, 55-year-old Timothy Wall, who police say then shot and killed himself. Pack lightly, airlines are scrambling to figure out how much the average passenger and his luggage weighs.
The FAA is requiring updates to passenger and baggage weight estimates that airlines use to keep each flight within airplane safety limits. Each U.S. airline must submit a plan by June 12th explaining which average weights for passengers and baggage they'll use. The plan must account for everything, all the way down to phones and clothing and how they estimated those weights. The FAA must approve each airline's plan separately. It's estimated the passengers and baggage weights will increase between 5 and 10% 1%. John Saucier, Fox News.
Pakistan, a speeding bus carrying religious pilgrims back from a holy shrine, has overturned on a highway in the southwestern part of the country. At least 19 people are dead, dozens more injured. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vax and Win, Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th through July 21st, weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car will be given away to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vax and Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are after that big halftime show that we all like so much. And I'm on the second item on the card, which is, where's my card here? Biden and the Justice Department versus Tina. And yesterday I spent some time with a brief submitted by the Department of Justice in favor of the Supreme Court granting their petition for writ of certiorari to overrule the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, you recall that Mr. Madero is a guy who lived in New York, moved and was drawing SSI, moved to Puerto Rico, continued to draw SSI. When the feds found out about it, they tried to collect it back from him. He wound up in court. The District Court of Puerto Rico found that not providing SSI in Puerto Rico was unconstitutional. The United States appealed that case to the First Circuit in Boston. First Circuit's sustained the District Court in Puerto Rico. And then the U.S. took the case to the Supreme Court. My prediction is that Madero is going to lose. And it's complicated, so get out your law and order notebooks. But yesterday, we talked about the insular cases, which, of course, is the cause of every problem. And dealing with it would be the solution for every problem, from SSI to SNAP benefits, the rhinoceros beetle, the brown tree snake, damage to our reefs, destruction of historical artifacts, you name it, it's there. And the United States, the Department of Justice says, well, insular cases don't say that equal protection doesn't apply in Puerto Rico. It's and by applying standard equal protection tools to this matter, Madero loses. In order to understand that, we go once again to equal protection and the three standards of scrutiny that apply. And here it is. If you have an equal protection, the Constitution says, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which, by the way, is reverse incorporated into the Due Process Clause of the 5th Amendment. Yeah. Well, when Brown versus Board of Education was decided, the Supreme Court decided that in Kansas, having separate schools for black and white kids was a denial of equal protection. The mere separation was a denial of equal protection. So the 14th Amendment applies only to the states. But on the same day that the Supreme Court decided Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, it decided another case called Bowling versus Sharp, which arose in the District of Columbia. Well, the Fifth Amendment doesn't have an equal protection clause. So the court had to do some really fancy footwork and say, well, there's a reverse incorporation there where the equal protection clause is incorporated into the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment. If you read enough of these cases, you're going to wind up with, like the lady in the editorial here. I say this is the system of justice because so much of this stuff is made up to reach a result, to reach the right result. And here's what the Equal Protection Clause says. No state shall, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction. You notice it says any person, not any citizen. Any person within its jurisdiction, the equal protection of the laws. Now, what that means is a classification. So you take persons and create two or more classes and identify two people, or identify a person as a member of one class and not the other. One class gets the benefit, the other class doesn't get the benefit. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about equal protection. Now, every classification is not violative of the Constitution. And here's how it sorts out. If that classification deals with a fundamental right, such as a classification based on race, then the doctrine of the strict scrutiny test applies. And this is what strict scrutiny means. Is the government action necessary to achieve a compelling government purpose? And is the statute the narrowest that could accomplish that purpose? If we're talking about a quasi-suspect classification like sex, is the government action substantially related to an important governmental purpose? It's almost impossible to get past strict scrutiny. But then we have the rational basis test. Is the government action rationally related to a legitimate government purpose? And the burden of proof is on the challenger. And when they say rationally related to a legitimate government purpose, that means does counsel for the respondent or the defendant, is he able to hypothesize a rational government purpose? Doesn't have to be what caused the legislature to act. It doesn't have to be something that actually happened. But if it's a rational possibility, that's good enough. Okay, now, here's what the Justice Department says. Respondents fails to overcome two precedents that control this issue, Torres and Rosario. Respondent does not deny that in Torres and Rosario, the Supreme Court concluded that Congress may treat Puerto Rico differently from states for purposes of a welfare program if there is a rational basis for distinction. He also does not deny that in Torres and Rosario, the court concluded that Congress' decision not to extend the SSI was rationally grounded on three factors. Puerto Ricans do not contribute to the federal treasury. The cost of treating Puerto Rico as a state under the statute would be high, and greater benefits could disrupt the Puerto Rican economy. Put simply, Torres and Rosario establish both that the law challenged here triggers rational basis review and that it satisfies that standard. Now, of course, this isn't the way it's presented. The question is presented in places like Tina Rosemunia Barnes's hearing on Resolution 56. You got to go into the heartbreaking details of the Scheller twins, and it's a tough one. But that's not how cases are decided. They're decided on the law, not on feelings. Sort of like the editorial in today's Daily Post, right?
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's just not fair. So once again, I have to tell you that Tina was dead wrong in everything she did with Resolution 56, as is Representative Grijalva with his House Resolution 279. Number one, when they're talking about the insular cases, they're talking about Downs versus Bidwell. They say it's racist. It's not racist. I've mentioned so many times that the language that they like to hang their hat on is obiter dictum, and it's hypothetical. That language did not apply to the conquered island territories, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. It's hypothetical. It's a statement of, well, if we acquire some other place, these are things that we need to keep in mind. So I characterize what Tina and so many others have done with that language, not as cherry picking, but horse apple picking. Second, in order to get SSI and greater SNAP benefits and these other things, you don't even need to say the words insular cases because they're all within the purview of Congress. Congress could enact by statute or could amend the SSI statute and say, yeah, Guam's included. Not a problem. Same with the SNAP benefits and the other things. You don't need to go to the insular cases. Third, having the Supreme Court overturn the insular cases is the worst possible thing that, as a matter of law, could happen to us. Because if it happened, we're sending our taxes to the IRS in Washington. No more mirror image taxes. No more Section 30 money. No GITA qualifying certificates. No more customs in quarantine at our borders enforcing our customs law. It's just a really bad, a really dumb thing to say, we want the insular cases overruled because they're racist. So I got to keep saying that every day because, as Robert Lynn said, it's easier to believe a lie that you've heard 1,000 times than the fact that you just heard once. And that lie, there are a lot more people out there broadcasting the lie, like Ann Parasatori, who couldn't even get the quote right. Ann Parasatori said on national television, the American flag flies on Guam, so you'd think American law applies there. But the Supreme Court, in its judgment, in its ruling, said that a place is populated by alien, quote, alien races that wouldn't understand our Anglo-Saxon principles of law. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't have to apply. Didn't even get the quote right. Couldn't even copy it down. And even if she had, it wasn't the decision of the court. It was obiter dictum. The decision of the court was, that the uniformity clause of the U.S. Constitution, which says that all taxes, etc., shall be uniform among the states, the uniformity clause doesn't apply. That's why we can have our territorial income tax instead of sending our taxes to Washington. That's why in the Northern Marianas, the ability to hold land in fee simple is limited only to those by people of Northern Marianas descent. Why in American Samoa, land tenure and election to the upper house of their legislature are governed by tribal custom and tradition. None of these things would pass muster if the uniformity clause applied, if Downs versus Bidwell were overruled. So talk about an exercise. This was not an exercise in futility. It was an exercise in stupidity. Somebody said the Ansler cases are racist. Yeah, I don't like race. Count me in. I'm not a racist. And away we go.
My uncle used to tell this joke where he'd go to a doctor and say, "Doctor, every time I drink coffee, I get a black eye." So the doctor said, and then he said, but I finally got better. So what did you do? I removed the spoon.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah. Tina sat there drinking coffee through her entire hearing.
Kept blaming it on the coffee.
Yeah, with a spoon in her cup. Okay, going on next to Victor Davis Hanson versus the Revolution. You know who Victor Davis Hanson is, don't you, Tony?
I know the Hanson brothers. I don't know who Victor
Davis Hanson is a conservative commentator, classicist, and military historian. He is a professor of classics emeritus at California State University, a senior fellow in classics and military history at Stanford, a fellow of Hillsdale College, and a distinguished fellow of the Center for American Greatness. Hanson has written 16 books, including The Western Way of War, Fields Without Dreams, and The Case for Trump. He's a political, historical, and social commentator, and if you ever see his stuff, it's well worth the time it takes to read it.
He's from the Hoover Institute.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And Hillsdale College, for those who aren't familiar with it, is in a small town called Hillsdale in Michigan. It is very conservative. They've got a shop in Chicago where they do some of their work. And it's probably the only college in the United States that does not take a nickel from any government. You want to go to college on a Pell Grant? Don't go to Hillsdale College. They do that so they can maintain their independence. It's a very good conservative college. So here's what Victor Davis Hanson says. Starry-eyed radicals in the 1960s and 70s dreamed that they either were going to take over America or destroy it. One of their favorite mottos was, change it or lose it, even as protests focused on drugs, music, race, class, sex, fashion, almost anything and everything. 60s radicals tutored America on long hair, wire-rimmed glasses, who was a drag, a square, a bummer, and who was hip, cool, groovy, mellow, and far out. Most of these silly revolutionaries were not unhinged weatherman killer, who later went on to advise William Jefferson Clinton, Bill Ayers, and Bernadette Dorn. Were weathermen killers, yeah. Or SDS would-be communists, but just adolescents along for the good time ride. With the end of the draft in 1972, the winding down of the Vietnam War, the oil embargoes, and worsening economy, the 60s revolution withered away. It was just amazing when the draft ended in 1972, how much less interested people of draft age were going to these riots and demonstrations.
There was a catalyst.
Yeah, it was all a matter of principle, not whether or not they'd get drafted. It was a matter of principle. Yeah. It is not even true that the 60s at least ensured needed reform. The civil rights movement and equal rights for women and gays were already birthed before the hippies, as were folk songs and early rock music. Instead, what the 60s revolution did was accelerate these trends, but also radicalized, manipulate, and coarsened them. The grasping yuppies of the 1980s were the natural successors to let it all hang out hippies. The 60s were at the heart a narcissistic free-for-all, when freedom often entails self-indulgence and avoiding responsibility. By 1981, the Reagan Revolution finished off dead-enders of the Woodstock generation. Most eventually grew up. They rebooted their self-centered drug, sex, and party impulses to fixations on money, status, and material things. 60s protesters mainlined divorce, abortion on demand, promiscuity, drug use, and one-parent homes. But by the late 1970s and 1980s, most veteran cultural revolutionaries had gotten married, were raising family, bought a house, got a job, and made money. This time around, their offspring's left-wing assault is different and far more ominous. The woke grandchildren of the former outsiders are now more ruthless, systematic insiders. The woke and wired new establishment knows how to use money and power to rebirth America as something the founders and most current Americans never envisioned. Name one mainline institution that the woke left does not now control and warp. The media, the campus, Silicon Valley, professional sports, corporate boardrooms, foundations, the K-12 establishment, the military hierarchy, the government deep state, the FBI top echelon, Protege Texan. The left absorbed them all, but this time around, members of the left really believe that, quote, by any means necessary is no mere slogan. Instead, it is a model of how to disrupt or destroy American customs, traditions, and values. Woke revolutionaries are not panhandlers, street people, or Grateful Dead groupies. They are not even a few nutty and murderous Symbionese Liberation Army terrorists fighting against the man, fighting against, quote, the man, close quote. You know who the man is, right? They are the man.
The original they.
They are the man. The wokesters are the man. They're not fighting the man, they are the man. Our 21st century revolutionaries are multi-billionaires with flip-flops, tie-dye T-shirts, and nose rings, but with the absolute power and desire to censor how half the country communicates or cancel them entirely. They don't flock to campus free speech areas. They are the campus administrators who ban free speech. They don't picket outside the Pentagon. They're inside the Pentagon, like the new SecDef. They don't chant, quote, eat the rich. They are the rich who eat at Napa Valley's French Laundry. They don't protest uptight values because they are more intolerant and puritanical than any Victorian. They don't believe in racial quotas based on proportional representation because they are racists who demand underrepresentation of bad racial groups and overrepresentation of good groups. The color of our skin is their gospel, not the content of our character. They are top-down revolutionaries. None of their agendas, from open borders and changing the Constitution to critical race theory and banning clean-burning fossil fuels, are ever favored among a majority of the population. Now, He's right. I hadn't thought of it in these terms, but he's absolutely right. They're top-down revolutionaries. Their guiding principle is never let a crisis go to waste. Only in times of pandemic, a national quarantine, or volatile race relations can the new upscale leftist revolutionaries use fear to push through policies that no one in calm times could stomach. True enough. Our revolutionaries hate dissent. They destroy any who question their media-spun hoaxes. Truth is their enemy and fear is their weapon. 60s paranoid revolutionaries warned about George Orwell's 1984. But our revolutionaries are 1984. Well, this elitist leftist revolution is more dangerous than its sloppy 60s predecessor. It's also more vulnerable given its obnoxious top-heavy apparatus. But only if the proverbial, quote, people finally say to their madness, enough is enough. I'm saying that. Enough is enough. Top-down driven revolutionaries. Okay, next item on the card is Plow versus CRT. Let's go to the seventh inning stretch, and after the seventh inning stretch, we're going to go straight to Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Okay, so here we are in that big halftime show, and we're jumping in our cars, and we're driving from Wrigley Field straight to Fort Smith, Arkansas. And when we get to Fort Smith, Arkansas, we're going to find out about the hanging judge, right, Jose?
Yes, sir. Let me get back to where we're at here. Yeah, the hanging judge, he's pretty interesting here. His name is Isaac Charles Parker. Judge Parker, and looks like he was on the bench for 21 years, and he became a politician also. But he is known to what is his jurisdiction was over the District of Arkansas and the Indian Territories,
which became Oklahoma.
Which became Oklahoma, and he also became a politician too. But I don't know what office he ran for. But hanging judge. Sentenced 160 people to death, and 79 of those were executed.
Okay, so maybe we should send a picture of Judge Parker to the editor of the Post. Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this guy?
Could we swear him in as a judge? Okay, I wonder if our Carl is worried about getting dizzy. He's on the merry-go-round again. For the second trip, right, our Carl?
Hey, Bob, yeah, I just wanted to
chime in about this new cultural revolution that is going on right now in America, and Guam, I might add. I just wanted to add a small note. David Horowitz, who's one of my favorite writers, he was born to two card-carrying communist parents. He's what's known as a red diaper baby. And for the first few decades of his life, he was a committed and open Marxist. He was the editor for what was at the time the top leftist publication in the country, Ramparts.
Oh, I thought you were going to say New York Times.
That came later. So he knows the left intimately. Something happened, and he eventually had a epiphany and went through a conversion. And he's been writing about the left and trying to defeat them for many years now. But he wrote a book called Radicals, and one of the radicals he looked at in these one of the chapters is Saul Alinsky. And Saul Alinsky wrote what to me is the field manual for the left. And as you mentioned before, it's actually quite a good book, even if you're on the right. It's pretty, the principles still apply. But one thing he mentioned that really resonated with me is that Alinsky hated the 60s radicals in-your-face approach. You know, that the street violence and all that stuff, because it turns people off. And he much advocated the Gramsci approach, although I don't, in what I've read, I've never heard him mention Gramsci, but I can't imagine he didn't know about him. I'm sure he did. But he much preferred infiltrating the institutions and adopting the dress, the manner of, the language, use democracy a lot, use freedom a lot, those kind of words, disarm your target audience and make them feel like you're one of them. And Obama was, and still is, I'm sure, an avid student of Alinsky. As a matter of fact, he taught at the Alinsky Institute for a while. I think he taught the principles of neighborhood organizing or something. I don't know what exactly he taught. But he is very much an Alinskyite, and he does not like the in-your-face 60s radical approach. He's very much against that, and I think that's why he warns the left that they're going overboard. They're showing their hand, and they really shouldn't do that. And anyway, that's just a thought I wanted to add, that is the key difference to what we have now, is that the left, one of the most important things they did is they captured the universities, and when which have become leftist, how would you say?
Leftist madrasas.
Yeah, exactly. And the graduates fan out across America, and they've gone into journalism, they've gone into public schools, they've gone into the boardrooms, they've gone into the military. And it's very much like a religion, like a secular fundamentalist, ultra strict sect. And if you violate their code, their orthodoxy, they will come after you. It's very much to me, it looks very much like a secular religion, and much more strict actually than some of the more, some of the
certainly more strict than the Catholic Church.
Yeah, exactly.
Which has great tolerance for things that are absolutely against its doctrine, like abortion.
Yeah, very true. And speaking of the Catholic Church, Paul Kengor has written about the influence of the Marxists and the communists on the Catholic Church and their infiltration of the Catholic Church. He wrote a book called The Devil and Karl Marx. I didn't read the whole thing. I read like a couple of chapters of it. But in parts of it, he did talk about the infiltration of the Catholic Church into the seminaries, and that's why we've got so much of this liberation theology going on in the Catholic Church. It's the influence of the Marxists and the communists infiltrating the Catholic Church. So it's all over the place. It's saturated. I don't know if you saw the Imprimis article recently by Christopher Rufo, titled "Critical Race Theory: What It Is and How to Fight It."
I did, yeah.
It's an excellent article, and I think he has some very good points there about what needs to be done. The left got where they're at by influencing the culture. I think it was the late Matthew Breitbart that said politics is downstream from culture. I think that's what he said, or maybe I got it reversed. But they seized the means of cultural production, and it's worked fantastically. And I think that's really the only thing that would work is to do things that influence the culture. Not easy, but I think that's something that needs to be done. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on it.
Okay, Carl. Well, thanks for chiming in. See you next Monday.
Bob. All right, bye-bye.
I felt like an ombudsman. Carl was correct. Andrew Breitbart had said politics is downstream from culture, and his doctrine idea is that to change politics, you must first change the culture.
It's very true, and it's something I was going to comment on. We tend to think of philosophers as people with unruly hair,
long beards,
long beards, who babble about things that no one cares about. But philosophers and theologians can have a dramatic effect on culture, which leads to politics. For instance, a totally despicable person named Karl Marx back in Germany in the 1800s with some really crackpot ideas has really shook up the world and is still shaking up the world. Not with his guns or knives or swords or anything like that, just with his ideas. On the other hand, we got Jesus Christ.
Well, Carl did mention also liberation theology, pretty much, which to me is a bane in the Catholic Church.
I don't remember the lady's name, but there was a lady who testified before Congress, and I should be able to look it up, who said that the Communist Party of the USA, CPUSA, which, talk about evil, was run from Moscow, we now know. And the thing that people don't understand about communism, they think, well, they're Democrats or Republicans or communists, one party, one party. No. If you are a communist, you must understand that lying, cheating, etc., are what's expected of you. There's no such thing as good behavior for a communist. There's only the cause. And by any means necessary is how the CPUSA operated. Now, we found out later on with something called the Venona intercepts. We cracked the Soviet Union's code along about 1943. So we were able to read a lot of their traffic between the CPUSA and Moscow. They were being directed straight from Moscow. And people like the Rosenbergs, Judith Copeland, etc., these were not innocent people who were duped into something. So I'll look up that name if I remember it over the weekend. She said that in the 1930s, the CPUSA deliberately planted 150 communists in Catholic seminaries. Of course, understanding, it's like Davis said in his piece, that you got to tear everything down. There has to be crisis before people are going to change. And understanding that the Catholic Church at that time was the biggest barrier to communism. So it had to destroy the Catholic Church if it was going to be successful. And like everything else, the Catholic Church has been infiltrated by communists and others. So there we are. So I'm just, maybe I ought to start every program after I finish the Second Amendment, quote Victor Davis Hanson and say, enough is enough. You know, this is, where we're heading now is not going to end well unless we make some real course corrections. Which takes me to the next item on the card, plow versus critical race theory. New Jersey teacher resigns, slammed school for segregation and critical race theory. A high school English teacher recently tendered her resignation on Tuesday in protest of the school's use of critical race theory to indoctrinate its students. She contended that the curriculum and work environment created by the leadership's fixation on race have been abysmal, and now she is speaking out. Dana Stengel-Plow submitted her resignation letter to the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, FAIR, an organization dedicated to advancing civil rights and liberties for all Americans and promoting a common culture based on fairness, understanding, and humanity. Well, and there we are, promoting a culture, just as the folks on the other side are promoting their culture, right? She criticized the Dwight Englewood School for segregating light-skinned teachers and threatening to fire and replace them with minority staff members. I believe the school is failing our students. Over the past few years, the school has embraced an ideology that's damaging to our students' intellectual and emotional growth and destroying any chance at creating a true community among our diverse population. The former educator described how students are conditioned to view each lesson or topic through the critical race theory lens of oppressor and oppressed, even when those factors are not relevant to the topic at hand. Quote, I teach students who approach text in search of the oppressor. I teach students who see inequities in text that have nothing to do with power. Students have internalized the message that this is the way we read and think about the world, and as a result, they fix on power and group identity. This fixation has stunted their ability to observe and engage with the full fabric of human experience in our literature. The former teacher also filmed a video in which she reciting the full content of the letter. In the letter, she argued that this theory of power hierarchies is only one way of seeing the world, and yet it pervades the school as the singular way of seeing the world. As a result, students arrive in my classroom accepting this theory as fact. People born with less melanin in their skins are oppressors, and people born with more melanin in their skins are oppressed. Men are oppressors, women are oppressed, and so on. This is the dominant and divisive ideology that is guiding our adolescent students. Plow noted that not all students agreed with the ideas being taught, but remained silent or pretended to go along with it for fear of being ostracized. Many pretend to agree because of pressure to conform. I've heard from students who want to ask a question but stop for fear of offending someone. I've heard from students who don't participate in discussions for fear of being ostracized. One student did not want to develop her personal essay about an experience she had in another country for fear that it might mean that she was, without even realizing it, racist. High school kids.
It's amazing.
Yeah. But it wasn't just the students who were pressured to conform. Teachers were also coerced into accepting and teaching the Marxist ideology. On at least 2 separate occasions in 2017-2018, our head of school, standing in front of the Hajar Auditorium, told the entire faculty that he would fire us all if he could, so he could replace us all with people of color. The former teacher also recounted a faculty meeting in which teachers were segregated by skin color. She explained that teachers who had light skin were placed into a white caucus group and asked to remember that they're white and take responsible for our power and privilege. It's clear that educators are not allowed to question or oppose the focus on critical race theory and its application in the classroom. Critical race theory recently became the subject of a controversy after it was revealed that many schools across the nation are using it to push their white people are racist orthodoxy to America's children. While many educators are simply using it to teach history, others are engaged in full-blown indoctrination designed to cast whites as racist oppressors and minorities as helpless victims. Several states are pushing to ban teaching of this theory in public schools. However, this does raise a critical question. Is the banning of critical race theory the victory we think it is? Those who espouse critical race theory are claiming that this is the way to address racial wealth, education and income disparities between minorities and whites. They believe their methodology is a solution to the racial gap problem. But on the right, these are issues that are typically ignored, meaning that the left is the only ones talking about it. The way to defeat bad ideas is by offering better ones, and no, ignoring a problem is not a better idea. If conservatives truly wish to defeat this ideology, they must do more than advocate for bans. They have to offer competing conservative solutions to address racial problems that are still present in the nation. Otherwise, the hard left will simply continue persuading more Americans that their way is best, and those bans will be easily overturned. Very interesting. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam!
Celebrate Dad this Father's Day. Mezcla Bistro in Nagaña is always happy to serve you and the family. We offer your local favorites to include herb-roasted prime rib and honey-glazed ham. Treat Dad to our special Sunday brunch buffet to enjoy free-flowing draft beer and sing along with Didi Uehara. Sunday, June 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Seating is limited, so call us at 479-2652 or 2653 to make your RSVP. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Here we are in the home stretch of Tall Tales. Next item on the card is Lebowski versus Doctors. And I will try to take this back and compare and contrast with the two editorials that we read today, which dealt with crime and punishment, although this doesn't deal with crime. I'm going to hang on for just a second here. I think I got somebody who wants to, talk about the home stretch, right? Yeah, I think another Joe, do you live in Kentucky?
You talking to me?
You're the only another Joe on the line.
No, I don't live in Kentucky.
Oh, because every time I head for Churchill Downs, it seems like you're there. I thought you must live in the neighborhood or something. What did you want to tell me today, another Joe?
I think the communist influence, Marxist, socialist, communist influence here in Guam, it's as far as it's only gotten this far, whatever it may be, their influences, due to the college or the university professors, unfortunately. And some of them seem like really nice people, but to the others, I don't know. And then the students, of course, some of them are not from Guam. Some of them come from off island. So I don't know. I don't know how else to characterize it. Other than UOG seems to be the meeting place for these,
Well, I've mentioned more than once on the show that Michael Bavacqua, who was a university professor, is the Westpac distributor for critical race theory. Everything that he says and does fits into the pattern of critical race theory. I've mentioned this before. He mentioned what a Navy captain said in 1904. So the critical race theory is you go back in history and you find events that you could characterize as disadvantageous to a group of people, and then you treat it as though it happened yesterday. And you treat it as though whatever happened is so deeply embedded in the society that only something like a revolution is appropriate, because there's no fixing it. It cannot be repaired. And that's classic Bavacqua.
Actually, there's an alternative.
Classic Bavacqua, always going back and saying, well, this is what the United States did, and that's what the United States did, and it's still here, and the only remedy is for us to be independent. Go ahead, another Joe.
So I think there might be an alternative for that. They could actually do a study and determine what sort of training for what sort of career positions we need here on Guam.
Yeah, but you don't. Another Joe, you don't understand. Critical race theory is not about making people successful. Critical race theory is about giving power to one group of people and taking it away from another group of people. It's not about making, even Black Lives Matter is a classic example. Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with helping black people have better lives. It's not about that at all.
It's unfortunate because they could do a lot of good, but they're spreading this communist, Marxist, socialist philosophies, ideology. Anyway, thanks for your time, Michael. I appreciate it. I'll just
okay, another Joe. Yeah. So, and that's the point. Politics follows culture. So all of these things I've been through this before. Karl Marx was the great theorist. In 1921, the Frankfurt School modified his theory, picked up by Antonio Gramsci. So the idea was not a violent workers' revolution to overthrow the bourgeoisie. It was infiltrate the institutions of the Western world, take them over, by means of what we now label critical race theory, putting oppressors, putting the oppressed against the oppressors, creating these crises so that the whole system can be thrown out and a new one put in place. And that's exactly what Bavacqua's been advocating while he was at the university. Ironically, today he wrote about Tony Palomo. Yeah, our museum is named after Tony Palomo. He was kind of one of the prime movers for the museum. But you recall the other day I had the Afghans against Protehila-Texan. And you remember what Protehila-Texan did, Jose?
They were quiet.
It's not what they did.
It's what they didn't do.
Yeah, and same with Bavacqua. We got another submarine is going to be home ported here. We're bringing in 70,000 Afghanis. And Bavacqua writes about Tony Palomo today, causing me to think maybe there's an accommodation there, that this radicalism is not all times for all reasons. Yeah. Okay, the last item on the card here is Lebowski versus doctors. I just got a couple minutes here, but Speaker Therese Terlai, who chairs the Legislative Committee on Health, has announced an informational hearing on June 23 for Bill 112, the proposed replacement to Guam's Medical Malpractice Mandatory Arbitration Act, before a public hearing set to take place on July 7 and 12. So something very significant is happening here. I've talked about David Lebowski versus the doctor the Mandatory Medical Malpractice Act, the objection that it freezes most plaintiffs out of medical malpractice suits, gives doctors unwarranted protections. And I'll pick this up on Monday. Still a lot to say about it. So Jose and I go back into our cocoons. Right, it's at 6 o'clock, but don't worry. At 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon, we'll emerge from those cocoons as beautiful butterflies. We'll see you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Of an infrastructure compromise. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A bipartisan group of senators say they've reached an agreement.
5 Senate Democrats and 5 Senate Republicans working on a possible infrastructure bill have a tentative agreement among themselves on how much to spend on roads, bridges, broadband, and other priorities.
I'm sure that things are open to some movement, but we've looked at various line items and a top line and some pay-fors.
Utah Republican Mitt Romney is not providing details on the size of the proposal. In any deal, we'll likely need sign-off from leadership of both parties and the White House. Republicans have indicated opposition to increasing tax rates. President Biden has rejected raising the gas tax or adding mileage fees to help offset funding.
Fox's Jared Halpern in Britain for today's start of the G7 summit. President Biden confirming the U.S. will donate millions of coronavirus vaccine doses for global distribution.
These 500 million vaccines will start to be shipped in August, as quickly as they roll off the manufacturing line.
Other G7 nations say combined they'll donate another 500 million doses. By next year, you may not need to get a shot to get vaccinated. Pfizer's CEO Albert Bourla.
Our scientists are also pursuing an oral treatment against COVID-19. Initial indications are promising, and if things goes well, we could apply for approval before the end of this year.
And Bourla says his company already has a mechanism ready if it needs to produce another vaccine for COVID variants. Oregon state lawmakers have expelled GOP state rep Mike Neerman. He was seen on surveillance video allowing protesters into the state capitol building during an emergency session to deal with the pandemic. Searching for a motive in Royal Palm Beach, Florida, police say a man who fatally shot a woman and her grandson in a supermarket apparently had no relationship with his victims. Police say 55-year-old Timothy Wall then killed himself. America is listening to Fox News.
Father's Day is coming up, and it's a perfect time to give that Fox dad in your life the greatest gift of all. Exclusive Fox News gear. Go to shop.foxnews.com and use code FOXDAD at checkout for 15% off on all orders, now through June 20th. Fox News hats, t-shirts, polos, mugs, socks, backpacks, and so much more. That's shop.foxnews.com, and be sure to use code FOXDAD at checkout for 15% off on all orders, now through June